Darkness fell upon Spring Lake. A bus rumbled into the abandoned station. 8 figures emerged. Freddy Krueger, with his bladed glove, grinned. Jason Voorhees, hockey mask hiding his face, cracked his neck. Michael Myers, wielding his trusty knife, stood silent. Leatherface revved his chainsaw, a guttural roar escaping him. Chucky, the killer doll, laughed maniacally. Madman Mars, Harry Warden, and Cropsy joined the macabre assembly. They were ready to paint the town red. The first victims were a group of teenagers partying by the lake. Their laughter died quickly. Freddy relished in their fear. Jason's machete gleamed under the moonlight. Michael moved like a phantom, unstoppable and silent. Leatherface chased screaming victims through the woods. Chucky, small but deadly, left a trail of bodies. The rampage had begun. News of the massacre spread through Spring Lake like wildfire. Panic seized the residents. The police were overwhelmed. The town's mayor, desperate, issued a town-wide curfew, but it was no use. The slashers were relentless. Their reign of terror continued night after night. Paul, an 18-year-old horror movie fanatic, felt a chill run down his spine as he watched the news. He knew these monsters. They were the stuff of nightmares. He knew what they were capable of. His blood ran cold. He had to do something. But what could one teenager do against such evil? An idea began to form in his mind. A crazy, desperate idea. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He had to find their equals. Creatures as old as time itself. He had to find the classic monsters. Paul grabbed his grandfather's old journal from the attic. It was filled with tales of legendary creatures, vampires, werewolves, creatures of the night. His grandfather always said they were real. Paul was about to find out. He packed a bag, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. He had a long journey ahead of him. Paul's journey took him to a crumbling castle in Transylvania. There, amidst the shadows, he found him, Count Dracula. The ancient vampire listened to Paul's plea. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of interest in their depths. Next, Paul ventured into the Bavarian Alps, to the ruins of Frankenstein's laboratory. He stood before the creature, stitched together from the dead, yet harboring a surprising gentleness. The monster, moved by Paul's desperation, agreed to help. In the dark heart of London, he found the Wolfman, cursed to roam the night. He too pledged his allegiance to Paul's cause. One by one, Paul found them. The mummy, awakened from his ancient slumber. The creature from the Black Lagoon, disturbed from his watery domain. The Invisible Man, forever unseen but deadly. Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, seeking redemption. And finally, the Phantom of the Opera, a master of illusion and music, his heart touched by the plight of Spring Lake. The news of the slasher's arrival in Spring Lake had spread through the supernatural world. The classic monsters, each with their own scores to settle with humanity, were hesitant to intervene. But Paul's plea, his genuine fear for his town, his belief in their better nature, touched them. They had been monsters, feared and hunted. Now they had a chance to be something else. Saviors. The slasher killers, sensing the gathering storm, grew bolder. They roamed the streets freely, their laughter echoing in the deserted town square. The air crackled with tension. The final confrontation was inevitable. Paul and the classic monsters arrived at the outskirts of Spring Lake. The town was eerily silent, shrouded in a thick fog. The smell of blood lingered in the air. The stage was set for an epic showdown. The battle began at the stroke of midnight. The slashers, drunk on carnage, charged into the town square, met head-on by the classic monsters. The ground trembled. The air crackled with energy. Dracula, a blur of fangs and fury, battled Freddy Krueger, their supernatural powers clashing. The creature from the Black Lagoon, a hulking behemoth, grappled with Jason Voorhees in the lake. The Wolfman, teeth-bared, fought Leatherface in a whirlwind of claws and chainsaw. The mummy, ancient and powerful, unleashed his wrath upon Chucky, the doll's laughter silenced by the sheer force of his rage. The Invisible Man, a whisper in the wind, tormented Michael Myers, turning the slasher's stealth against him. Quasimodo, wielding his brute strength, faced off against Madman Mars, the clang of metal against metal echoing through the night. The Phantom of the Opera, his voice a haunting melody, used his mastery of illusion to disorient Harry Warden and Cropsy, turning their own fears against them. Paul, armed with his grandfather's journal and his knowledge of the monsters, directed the fight, his voice hoarse from shouting, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle raged throughout the night. Buildings crumbled. The ground was stained with blood, both human and monster. But slowly, surely, the tide began to turn. The classic monsters, driven by a strange sense of nobility and my unwavering belief, fought with a ferocity that surprised even themselves. One by one, the slashers fell. Freddy Krueger, his power waning, was dragged into the shadows by Dracula. Jason Voorhees, his body riddled with wounds, sank into the lake, dragged down by the creature from the Black Lagoon. Michael Myers, his movements finally stilled, lay defeated by the combined might of the Invisible Man and the Phantom's illusions. The rest soon followed, their reign of terror brought to an end. By dawn, the town square was silent. The only sounds were the moans of the wounded and my soft sobs, overwhelmed by the carnage but relieved that it was finally over. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the classic monsters gathered around me. They were weary from battle, their faces etched with the fatigue of a long night, but there was a sense of peace about them, a quiet satisfaction of a task well done. They looked at me, this young man who had brought them together, who had reminded them of their own capacity for good. I had shown them that even monsters could be heroes. They nodded at me, a silent vow to honor the pact we had made. They would leave Spring Lake, disappear back into the shadows. The townspeople slowly emerged from their homes, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The nightmare was over. The slashers were gone. But the memory of that night, the horrors they had witnessed, would forever be seared into their minds. Life in Spring Lake would never be the same. The town rebuilt, but the scars remained. And me, I stayed in Spring Lake, a silent guardian, forever changed by my encounter with the monsters, both good and evil. I knew that evil never truly dies. It just waits, dormant, for the right moment to resurface. And I would be ready.